Hello, everyone. My name is Loreal Lynch. I'm the CMO of Jasper. Just a quick intro on Jasper. Jasper was one of the first generative AI native companies to hit the market 3 years ago. We've got more than 100,000 customers, including 850 in the enterprise. And today, I'm thrilled to be here with Eli Stein, partner at McKinsey, so we can both share with you some of the learnings that we've gained about how purpose-built AI workflows are really fueling enterprise transformation. We're going to take about 30 minutes to do a fireside chat, talk about some of these learnings. At the end, we're going to show a short demo of an AI workflow in action for account-based marketing. And then we're going to open it up to Q&A. So in the meantime, if you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to drop them into the Q&A and we will get to those at the end. But before I jump in, transformation is a bit of a buzzword. So I want to clarify exactly what we mean when we talk about transformation. So I'll just give a quick overview on, kind of the way that we think about it internally. I would say throughout the years, there have been lots of technological and sort of macroeconomic accelerants that have given rise to different types of transformation within the enterprise. And we talk about these in four distinct buckets. So there's kind of the rise of cloud computing resulted in entire business models being reimagined. So if you think about a company like Netflix that was able to build an entire subscription business around streaming, that's really representative of what we call business model transformation. Another example is, being able to not have to go to the bank to deposit your check. Totally different, business model. Similarly, then you saw kind of the rise of mobile give way to customer experience transformation in a really impactful way because customers could get whatever they needed to almost instantaneously just by tapping on their mobile phone. So this is where Amazon really became a huge powerhouse. It paved the way for on-demand delivery apps, DoorDash, Instacart. And again, that's representative of the customer experience transformation. And then when COVID hit in 2020, remote work became the norm. Hybrid environments, a lot of us are still working in hybrid environments or remote environments. I'm working from home right now. And that gave rise to platforms like Zoom or Slack. And we think of this as really like an employee experience transformation. It's a different way of working. And now what we're seeing is artificial intelligence, which is becoming pervasive across business environments because it has the ability to truly transform how we do our jobs in a very powerful way. And this falls into the category of business process transformation. And this is where Jasper plays. This is where, a lot of AI is playing, kind of where we're going to be centering our conversation today, is reimagining how marketing functions in the age of AI. But as Eli and I were discussing, leading up to this webinar, AI has the power to not only change how we work, it also does have the power to change how consumers consume. And so with that, Eli, would love to turn it over to you to share a little more color on what you're seeing, in your role at McKinsey across both of these vectors, kind of the transformation of how we work and also of how consumers consume.
Of course. First of all, thanks for joining the webinar. My name is Eli. I'm a partner in McKinsey's marketing and sales practice. I lead a lot of our work around AI-enabled marketing. One of the most interesting things about AI that we're seeing is it's simultaneously transforming how we work, how consumers consume, and how buyers buy. So on the consumers consume portion, we're seeing a democratization of consumers as creators, right? Consumers for the first time have access to creative tools at their fingertips that are largely able to be used by non-technical, non-traditionally creative folks. That's catalyzing the shift towards influencer-based commerce, social commerce, et cetera. And increasingly, we're seeing consumers trust other consumers more than they trust brands and what brands say. We can also imagine a world in the somewhat near future where agents play an increasingly large role in purchasing, either moderating what consumers see, much like SEO started to do 10, 15 years ago, or even making direct purchasing decisions on behalf of consumers. You could imagine low involvement purchases like replenishment purchases, et cetera, being delegated to agents. We're already seeing agentic purchasing on behalf of buyers, especially around replenishment purchases for businesses. And then there's, of course, the evolution in how we work, how we create content, how we distribute content, localize content, et cetera, and then how we interact amongst functions. All of that is being evolved through the powers of AI.
Yeah, really, really powerful. And I love the specific examples that you use. And where I want to take this a little bit is, we talked in promoting this webinar, and where I want to drill in is on workflows specifically. And I know this is a purposely bit of a broad question, but I want to get your thoughts on AI powered workflows and how we're seeing those specifically impact some of these vectors that we were just talking about, how people work, how consumers consume. But can you drill in a little bit on the workflow itself?
Of course. So let me talk about how we do work and how AI-powered workflows are changing the way people work. Um, we've seen starting, call it 2, 3 years ago, where AI, initially started to be popularized, even though the technology itself, has been evolving for the past arguably 15 years. Workflows start to change by people injecting AI to help with specific tasks. So creation of images, adaptation of images, creation of copy, creation of video, etc. Name your example company Abound that started to inject AI into tasks. That has driven, some efficiency. It's also driven some growth through the increased power of localization. But increasingly, what we're starting to see is a retooling of whole workflows on the basis of what these tools can speed and what these tools can augment. So, for instance, uh, entirely bringing together briefs and content creation. If the same person or one person can be the brief creator and the content creator. Similarly, we've seen the rise of new roles. So new roles of folks that are maintaining and optimizing prompt libraries to be used by others. New roles of folks that are responsible for managing and increasing the quality of marketing-oriented tools. Could be fine-tuning models. So in short, what we've started to see is the injection of AI tools into specific aspects of workflows. That's not new. We've started to see process redesign to rethink which steps are necessary and which handoffs are necessary as new capabilities come online. And then we've seen new roles start to arise to make sure that these processes are working as intended.
That makes sense. And one of the things that, I've noticed in the customers that we work with is there's sort of this maturity curve when it comes to AI adoption. And I think the good news is we're seeing more and more businesses and employees start to adopt AI. In fact, I think that in the recent Salesforce State of Marketing study, it was like 60+%, 65% of marketers are using AI. Interestingly, in that same study, I think 60% of leaders are not seeing the impact of AI. And what we've seen, at least at Jasper, is, when companies first started to adopt Jasper, say 3 years ago, when we first came to market, people were using Jasper just as a content creation tool. I'm going to create a piece of content, or I'm going to do, one specific thing with AI. And an example of that would be, or like, say that those 65% of employees that are using AI are using Chat GPT, and maybe there could be a chat bot or a chat app that can help you do account research. And account research is great. You can identify where to focus, but that doesn't get your campaign in market. There's multiple, to your point on the workflow, there's multiple steps required. And we talk about this like AI inflection point, at which point you can kind of reach AI scale and have that really start to turbocharge your impact. And it's hard to reach that point, but I really do believe that workflows and these AI powered workflows and figuring out what those processes are end to end, not just the piecemeal individual components of like creating a brief or doing the account research, but stitching those together into an end-to-end workflow that becomes sort of like the new normal in terms of the way you operate as a team in the enterprise. And so that's one observation that I've had, and I'm curious to throw the question to you. How are you seeing sort of the adoption of these workflows? It's how is that different than what you've seen over the last several years in terms of AI adoption and rollout? Are you seeing kind of the same thing?
Sure. Yeah, I think our experience is fairly similar. We think of AI adoption in 5 stages. The first stage is excitement and talking about it. That's where many companies were 2, 3 years
Yeah.
ago. The second stage is starting to inject AI, sometimes as a pilot, into individual tasks. The third stage is starting to scale the adoption of AI in either tasks or broader workflows. The fourth is starting to transform work processes with holistic end-to-end workflows as opposed to individual tasks. And the
Hmm.
fifth is, finally transforming a whole domain with AI. The domain could be marketing. Most companies we see are in stage two and are not entirely thrilled about it. What they
Yeah.
say is, they envisioned AI either driving tremendous growth or driving, some cost efficiencies, and they're largely, not seeing either. And the reason is quite clear. If you shave a bit of time off the tasks you're doing today, you're not seeing growth because you are not doing a fundamentally different type of marketing than you did in the past. And you're also not seeing efficiency because shaving a bit of time off, the same tasks as today does not produce bottom line efficiency at scale. So most of the clients that we see are aiming to evolve from step two to step three, which is to say, how do we take the piloting and experimenting that we've done in individual tasks, use that to transform more holistic workflows, and then on the basis of those workflows, either drive real material growth at scale, or drop some investment to the bottom line, potentially to reinvest in other forms of marketing.
Yeah, I think you're right. A lot of companies are kind of sitting at that place and a little feeling a little stuck on how to get to the next stage. And what would you say in your experience is the reason for that? Like, what are some of the main challenges that you find enterprises face? Like an example is I believe Gartner published some research recently saying that it's actually critical for leaders to be engaged in the actual use case, like prioritization. And specifically, I think Gartner said that CMOs being engaged in the use case prioritization, and I think they said has a direct correlation on the success of the AI program and the scale of the program. And so if you go back to that stat on, employees are using AI, leaders aren't seeing the impact. I think leaders need to be sort of that coach that's helping to guide and make sure that it's attached to the company level and the business level objectives and priorities. And that's one of the things that I've heard as a challenge within organizations with reaching scale is like, well, it's just not having the ROI that we expected, or it's not having the impact that we want beyond, like you said, shaving a few hours off, per week. So what are some of the other challenges that you're seeing businesses face when it comes to reaching that point of scale?
Yeah. Look, there's three real differentiators we've seen from companies that are able to achieve scale. The first is exactly, what you mentioned, which is this being a real executive priority. If a
Hmm.
company is going to transform a material component of a domain like marketing, let's say, transform all of the programmatic media that we do, it has to be not only a CMO level priority, but also a CEO and even a board level priority. And our
Hmm.
guidance to executives is, if you want to experiment at subscale, that's fine. But if you really want to transform at scale, you need to put a number out there as to the impact, and that number ideally should be big enough to be visible to the board. That's the first, is shine a big spotlight on this area and do it because of the impact you can have. The second is, start to build for scale. And what we, don't mean is build a monolith before you have impact. We are real believers in MVPs. But too often we see pilots not built for scale, and they're built out of bubblegum and duct tape. And when
Hmm.
you are building an MVP, you need to think about the data foundation, the analytical foundation, the technology foundation, et cetera, and make sure that you're not, for instance, introducing new inefficient manual steps as opposed to building an API, but you really are building for scale, even if the first instance is an MVP that will be used in a pilot. The third area, which might be the most important, is the human aspect. And all too often we see companies forget the change management aspect.
Yeah.
And I think because sometimes AI can feel like it has human-like qualities, folks forget that the humans that are going to be using these tools need to undergo massive change in their roles, change in their skills, and also in many cases, change in mindsets. And many operators um, find a lot of nervousness and fear as this change is happening in companies. And we've seen many companies that get it right in terms of declaring a board level priority, get it right in terms of building for scale, but then don't get the change management right, and that's almost the worst outcome.
Let's talk a little bit more about change management because that's one of the biggest learnings that I've had since joining Jasper is that So little of it is about the actual technology, and the bigger challenge is really about the change management. There's a skills and knowledge gap that exists. It's how do you organize for success, get the right stakeholders engaged, the right, like you said, board level priority, company level priority. We do see a lot of companies that will designate someone as like an AI transformation lead. I think it's emerged as a best practice that now companies have like a council, an AI council with a stakeholder across, IT, legal, marketing, and other departments. We also see, even across the marketing organization, a marketing AI council emerging as sort of a best practice where there's different stakeholders across the marketing organization because a lot of organizations have such huge marketing teams and they all have different priorities. And to my point earlier on having leadership engaged, so there needs to be a CMO level involvement, but the CMO doesn't always know what the actual workflows are day to day and is more removed from that. So they might know the company level and the board level priorities and can guide from that perspective. But then there's the kind of individual contributors that really know, like, these are the workflows, these are where we can optimize. And so having different stakeholders on a council from that perspective. But in addition to sort of councils and organizational shifts, what do you see as, the role of change management and what advice would you give in terms of, how to tackle this?
Yeah. So first of all, wholeheartedly agree with councils and 2 points maybe to underline. The first is hardwiring the cross-functional collaboration. Unlike some prior transformations in marketing, this one cannot be done without the CIO and someone that knows data very well.
Hmm.
And secondly, getting the right collaboration between uh, organic idea generation for the folks that live the workflows every day, as well as more senior executives that are going to have a real sense of what will impact the company in a material way in terms of their results. We've seen companies fall on both sides of those lines, right? Focus too much on democratic use case selection, and then you have a potpourri of use cases that don't intersect and don't deliver a ton of value. We've also seen companies that declare they're going to transform a workflow top down, but the operational realities on the ground of how that workflow
Right.
actually works are very different. Then to your direct question of, what else do you see? The human level operator transformation is crucially important. And many companies struggle here because the scale is massive, right? Think about a large marketing organization can have north of 2,000, 3,000 employees, not even considering collaborators in the marketing supply chain like agency colleagues. We've seen two things really be important. The first is doing the technical training so that colleagues know how to use these new tools. And it means different things for different people. For instance, if you're taking a brand leader who traditionally has uh, facilitated marketing through organizing and influencing others, and you are going to give him or her the ability to create. That is a very different skill they need to learn. Versus if you're taking a traditional creative who has produced creative in the past in human powered ways, and you're now giving him or her a tool to augment that power with AI. Those are two very different personas that you need to inject new skills into. That's the first is don't forget the skills impact because it's real. The second is being clear with colleagues about how you think their roles will change. And there's nothing scarier as an operator than being told, here's a tool that will make you 20% more efficient, but not being told, what else you're supposed to do. It doesn't feel good. Most employees, want to add value. And then, of
Yeah.
course, the mind runs wild as to, why is this happening? What will be the impact on me? What we've increasingly found is that for companies that are approaching this from a growth lens, which many are, their
Hmm.
desire is that marketers are able to spend less time in project management and administration and more time doing what marketers do best, which is deeply understanding the human condition, inspiring customers, imagining how we can communicate differently with different groups of customers. And we found it very helpful to tell marketers with the 20% of your time you're freeing up, here's what we want you to do, and then giving them real guidance. In the past, you haven't had the ability to spend any time thinking about how you're going to inspire your customers. Now you can. What tactically should that
Yeah.
look like? between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. And that's the change management that's crucially important so uh, folks don't learn how to use the tools, but then are unsure how to use the time that's being freed.
Yeah, that's really interesting because it's a question that I still get often on sort of job replacement and even in marketing. And I'm like, really, in marketing, you would think that because in marketing we're so understaffed, underfunded. I feel like we constantly are, being asked to do more with less. So another stat from Gartner is that I think marketing budgets as a percentage of overall company revenue have fallen to post-pandemic lows. I think it's 7.7% of overall company revenue, down from about 9% last year. And so that's, it's critical for marketing teams to figure out how to take advantage of AI for that reason, to be able to do more with less. And my question is always, people ask like, oh, well, can you reduce heads? And I'm like, I don't have enough heads. So if I could free up time so that my people could do more, and focus to your point on the more strategic work or the more creative work, how to inspire customers. I mean, just an example with, with creative teams, for example, there was another stat that marketers spend 1/3 of their time on repetitive tasks. And so if you take a creative team, creating banner ads, just creating multiple versions of banner ads, as opposed to being able to spend their time building a really great brand strategy or creative strategy, which they might feel they don't have enough time for. But I think to your point, the part that even I was missing is they need training on that. They need to be told what to do and how to do that and to sort of be empowered to do that. It's not just like, hey, you're saving 20%, you should know what to do, but to actually give them the guidance and sort of the structure to be able to go out and do that, which I think is important.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you, when you are talking to the clients that you work with, do you get the question or does it come up a lot with, regards to job replacement or AI, taking jobs and how do you respond to that or kind of coach around that?
Sure. Look, AI, like, many tools, has the potential to help us do today's tasks faster. And there absolutely is a strategic choice about whether you want to translate doing today's tasks faster into efficiency. And some companies are choosing that, and that is a fine strategic choice. Uh, where we see most companies is reinvesting that time and reinvesting those dollars into driving growth. The somewhat overused analogy is Excel in FP&A, right? If you think about the FP&A before the rise of Excel,
Yeah.
it was largely an accounting function with arguably little value add beyond giving executives into visibility into where they are. There was one view back then that Excel would entirely make FP&A obsolete. That is not what happened, right? FP&A transformed into a function that was more about predicting how the future will look in finances, more about optimizing a company's financial profile, et cetera. That is how most of my clients are approaching this moment in marketing, thinking about how we can leverage these tools to, really accomplish what we've always wanted to in marketing and be relevant and authentic to subgroups of consumers that matter and inspire them to change their behavior. And one could argue that, as marketers, we've never really had the tools to fully do that. Think
True.
about global brands that there's 1,700 different dialects spoken in India. How many global brands can talk in all 1,700 of those dialects?
Really good point. Yeah.
Not many. It's one, practically infeasible, and two, even if you could, in the past hire up to do that, it's cost prohibitive. So most of my clients are thinking about how can they address those growth mandates and use this as a share gain opportunity as opposed to an efficiency opportunity. Even though, some companies are choosing to find efficiencies, and that's a perfectly, valid and real opportunity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I wanted to get into specific like use case examples that you're saying and that we're seeing in the market. But before I jump in, I know I said I would save questions to the end, but there are a couple of questions that have come in around the topic of change management. So I just want to hit those now while we're talking about this. And one of them, someone says they've been tasked with creating and implementing an AI council for their own company's marketing team. And she says, but I feel alone in the process and overwhelmed by how much need and gaps and success there are, and wants to know if you have any ideas or tips.
That's a great question, and I don't think you certainly don't feel alone. I've been with many colleagues and clients who have been in your shoes about tasks in forming a council. Maybe two to three success factors that I've seen others do. One is this cannot be marketing alone, right? And if the council is chaired by marketers, exclusively led by marketers, you're not going to have the skills at the table to make the right decisions. In particular, analytics, information technology, human resources, and legal are crucial functions, to making this work. So the first thing I would advise is to build an alliance with the functions that are needed to get this done. The second is a council without a money map is the council that's bound to run in circles. And what I mean by a money map is a sense of where it makes sense to invest in AI capabilities. For instance, some companies have rich consumer data, but are not able to adequately personalize because of content creation constraints. Other companies don't have access to consumer data, right? They sell through intermediaries. Some companies produce a lot of video. Getting more efficient in producing video is a real, cost savings opportunity. Other companies don't, right? They prioritize other mediums. So doing the analysis on where there is value to be gained, either in growth or efficiency, is crucially important. Otherwise, you're going to be, leading the organization, without a roadmap. And then the third thing I've seen is some councils either overweight the let's get points on the board through pilots, or overweight that let's build for scale, and we're not going to
Mhm.
release something until we've got this beautiful monolith. And it's a hard middle ground to strike, but you've got to strike the middle ground, and that you can't have a pilot built out of bubblegum and duct tape, but you can't spend forever building something, because by the time it's built you will be you'll be behind. So that the real successful councils have, with their money map, declared one to two board level priorities, put a stake in the ground of we're going to have an MVP in the next 3 to 6 months, depending on how complex this area is. And then they build it and they launch it, as opposed to spending, forever managing, thousands of pilots that are never going to see scale.
Yeah, that's really interesting is striking that balance. And kind of a similar question here, just on the topic of change management is, it seems like this gets much harder when you go from phase two to phase three, redesigning entire workflows, because it will and should have more impact on roles, charters, skills, etc. So any tips on how to handle change management specifically at this stage in particular?
Look, you nailed the problem statement, and which is why many companies struggle to go from stage two to stage three. Is all of a sudden it becomes less of a let's build or buy or rent some technology and get it in the hands of a small number of people, into let's change a whole domain. The message I would have here is, approach it like a holistic change management task, not all that dissimilar from change management in other domains, right? So this is not new to companies. Cloud transformation, digital
Right.
transformation,
Yeah.
et cetera. It's all been, an evolving playbook around how roles change, how tasks change, how leadership structures change, how incentives change, how you need to change mindsets and behaviors. Um, and I think that the biggest mistake many companies make is they just don't realize that, and they try to roll from stage two to stage three without taking a step back and saying, let's think purposefully about the change management and be as thoughtful as we were for, let's say, a digital transformation 5, 7 years ago.
That makes a lot of sense. And one of the things you mentioned, before, in terms of, you mentioned it as part of the change management process, but I want to actually double click a little bit into it, because you said, choosing a couple of priorities that are sort of board level priorities and optimizing for those, KPIs. But I think even that is hard to do, because we said earlier, a lot of times the very obvious benefit of AI is efficiency and time savings. And something that we work with a lot of our customers on is going beyond that, beyond efficiency. How do you, build a business case around AI being able to drive top line growth? So we work, for example, with a lot of B2C, like retail companies. who are able to scale product descriptions, images and text using Jasper. And we have one large customer that's able to, that translates into, yes, 30% faster time getting these products to market and writing these product descriptions. But what that ultimately means is it's 50 more SKUs that are shipping per week. And the 50 SKUs shipping per week, that's top line growth. It's a lot different than it's saving my team, this many hours that they used to do before. So it's getting to that point in the business case. And one of the questions that just came in is how is McKinsey guiding clients on capital allocation for adoption of these Gen AI tools within a marketing function? Like, what are some more common value drivers you're seeing enterprises embrace to do so? And are there any additional value drivers that you would challenge enterprises to add to their business cases? So it kind of goes along with that. We focus a lot on moving from efficiency to top line growth, but drilling into that even more, do you have more color to share on, examples of business cases that you're helping clients to build?
Yeah, of course. So maybe a couple of thoughts. One, we don't have guidance on capital allocation writ large because it really does depend on different company situations, and even the data rich versus data poor companies where they are going to invest will be vastly different. A couple things that we think about. So on the growth side, we think about efficiency in terms of excuse me, efficiency is the wrong word. We growth in terms of personalization and versioning, right? What can be done, what can be done there. Second, we think about quality, right? Creative quality can increase with new tools even before you think about versioning. Third, on the growth side, we think about media allocation, right? Where you're putting your media dollars at the intersection of audience, channel slash inventory and message. Those are the main growth drivers we think about. Then on the cost side, we think about internal and external costs and the productivity and efficiency of your people, and then your marketing supply chain, which for many companies is large and sprawling and a big driver of cost. Those are the call it territories in the money map that we think about. And the territories that are prioritized for different companies really depend very heavily on the sector, company history, region, et cetera.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really helpful. Helpful for me too, actually. Um, I know we have a demo that we want to show. I want to see if we can just touch on a couple of more topics here. And I know we can do it, probably have time for a few more questions at the end. Um, the question was really on real world examples of AI powered workflows. And I know, I mentioned retail being one that we see a lot on the B2B tech side. We see a lot of, personalization as kind of a burning need. Personalization, both B2C and B2B, but account-based marketing is a big use case that we see across large tech companies and large B2B companies is being able to kind of drive account-based marketing at scale. I know I've seen some stuff in the media too, not Jasper customers, but for example, like Coke doing holiday commercials using generative AI. I mentioned our retail examples. I wonder if there's any other examples that you're seeing on kind of creative ways that these workflows are coming to market now that people are getting a little more sophisticated.
Sure. Um, a couple of interesting examples. So I've seen companies start to use new data sources to address leads. So think of B2B or B2 SMB examples where plenty of company information is public, right? Companies that are adding to their physical space and they need to file for permits. Companies that are taking growth action, starting offices in new countries or regions, for instance. I've seen folks create APIs that pipe that information into LLMs and then creating a prompt pipeline that can automatically deploy tailored communications. If for instance we notice that a company is expanding their office, let's say in Detroit. That's one. Another maybe more basic example is tailoring to what's going on locally in different regions. So, for instance, we've seen the integration with traditional social listening tools into prompt pipelines that personalize and tailor emails, such that if there is a talk of the town in San Francisco, for instance, maybe it's some musician performing that's popular in the Gen Z community, company can be more temporally relevant there than they are, let's say, in Salt Lake, in a way that would have taken much more time and lag before the age of AI.
It's really interesting. One of the ones that we've seen emerging is on managing the brand, and specifically when it comes to like image quality. So we have some media customers that have multiple brands, and each of the brands are kind of like franchise. They license out that content, and so that leads to a proliferation of content being developed across contractors, across different companies, but it's licensed content, so they care very much about the brand. And in order to manage that at scale, they're able to kind of use AI to flag brand violations when it's created, because they might have a brand book, 160-page PDF book, but you can't be sure that like every single content creator across all of the different sub brands, across all of the different regions is going to be, reading and memorizing that 160-page brand book. So being able to use AI to flag brand violations is another use case that we've seen recently that people are starting to kind of adopt, which is an interesting one for from a brand compliance perspective. Um, we'll have time for more questions at the end, but for now, I'm going to turn it over to Ari. And I did mention that, from a use case perspective, account-based marketing and personalization is something that we're seeing a lot at Jasper. A lot of our customers take advantage of. And so I want to turn it over to Ari, who's just going to show a short demo of what this looks like within Jasper, and then we'll come back and take a few more questions. So go ahead, Ari.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Ari Auerbach. I am on our AI solutions team. I'm really excited to kind of run you through a live workflow today where we're going to actually be taking some data from different CRM sources. Today, we'll showcase Salesforce, how we can then leverage that data to actually help us strategize and create a marketing brief. And then from there, actually generate some emails and push them to the places where we actually publish that information in tools like HubSpot. But as I start to run through this demonstration today, imagine that I'm playing the role of a marketing manager who is responsible for creating this account-based marketing campaign, really from this end-to-end workflow with start to finish. And as I start to run through this, one note is that the data here is anonymized. Just want to make sure that piece is clear, but we'll go ahead and use this data to kind of help us publish through this phase and get started with that marketing campaign. So as I start here, what I want to focus on right now is how we can actually have data within many different CRMs that store your contact data, your deal win data, and maybe sales pipeline data. And this CRM data has a ton of potential for a marketer like me. But imagine how killer my campaigns and content could be if I were actually able to leverage this information in tools like Jasper. Now, unfortunately, it's really hard for most marketers to actually use this in an actionable way, but it's not the case for me because I have this integration with my Salesforce and Jasper. And now within Jasper powered workflow, I can actually automatically sync this information directly into places like Jasper's knowledge base, where it can serve as knowledge and context for me to help me with all the different marketing programs that I might have. And here, once I dive into Jasper, you can see all of that pipeline data is now here. And this is super powerful for me because now I can start to utilize this to actually help me create some of these better campaigns. Now, once I have this data and I'm starting to use it, again, as we run through this workflow, the first thing that I need to do is actually refine my campaign strategy. For this case, let's say I have a CMO on board and she's been really bullish on getting super, super tailored with respect to our ideal customer profile. And I need to know which customer segment to actually focus on with this data. So what I'm going to show you here now is Jasper's marketing train chat assistant, which allows for me to understand and write and think in everything in the context of marketing. And as I run through this, I'm going to ask Jasper to actually help me identify some of those top marketing segments, then go to Google and identify some top customers, and then ultimately help me understand with the different data that we have and products we service, how we can actually use this to help us focus on specific segments. But as Loreal and Eli were kind of mentioning earlier, this is sort of like the starting and stopping point for many different companies today that are in this sort of experimentation mode. where what this used to be is where most people were able to get a lot of value out of AI. But the reality is today that these standalone chat assistants and sort of copilots, right, leave a lot to be desired. And they're not getting to that sort of final stage of creating these emails or other components, but they kind of leave you within this specific tool as a stopping point. And that's where I get to kind of dive in through the rest of this to actually take this chat interaction that we just had and bring this to life through a variety of other workflows that can help us create this content. So we've strategized, we've come up with the different topics or companies that we want to target. And that's where now I get to move as this marketing manager through the rest of my workflow. Now, as this marketing manager, I don't have a lot of time or to spend learning how to prompt engineer. We heard a little bit about even prompt libraries and some of those components. And fortunately for me, I actually have this Jasper application with a ton of pre-built apps to help me work through all of these different types of content I might be creating to help me as a marketer through these workflows. And as I continue to move through this process, I first want to actually use this to help me create a campaign brief that can help me strategize through the rest of my campaign creation. But what you'll notice here is Jasper will actually guide me step by step through these workflows like these campaign briefs. And for here in this use case, I actually want to focus, since it is holiday time, a little bit more on how we can actually use our image suite from that information we got to help me tailor this campaign appropriately to these different audiences in the retail segment. Now, as we let Jasper run through this, we're going to actually let this go. And then once it creates this campaign content, I'd love for you to take a look at all of the different pieces that you'll see here with Jasper's Marketing IQ baked in. What you'll notice is that instead of sort of generic outputs, it's really built with the marketer in mind. And it's simple things, right? Like deliverables in a table, right? Or key messages as bullet points. But as we think about these end-to-end marketing workflows, these really matter to allow for those checks and balances within these processes that allow for someone like my CMO to have a really clear and distinct pathway to help her guide me through the rest of my automation that we're going to do in a moment. But fortunately from here, we've created this brief, we've taken that strategy and we put it all together. And now I get to dive into some of these further automations using some of the tools that I already used today. Now, once this plan is created, I can actually dive into the places that I like to work, like a spreadsheet. And what you're looking at here today is actually a spreadsheet that was created via a Jasper-powered workflow automation. This was done prior to the call just for sake of speed, but it allows for me to actually do all of the things that I want to do in Jasper outside of it in the tools that I actually prefer to work in. And as I start to work through targeting these specific campaigns or companies, there's a few different components that are going to help me generate these specific account-based marketing emails that are all essential to making sure they're personalized at scale. The first thing is actually using our company's tone of voice, where fortunately for me, Jasper allows for me to have a series of tones of voice to help me specifically tailor and tune and target each of those individual audiences that we want to work with. Here, I can just simply, in my spreadsheet, because it's hooked into Jasper, allow for me to ensure that I'm focusing on my retail segment through each of these specific companies. Now, on top of that, I can now bring Jasper directly into these workflows to help me generate a series of account research and personalized emails that can then be based off of that brief and specific tone of voice to help me tailor to each of these unique audiences at scale. Now, as Jasper continues to run through this, we're going to start to see these unique emails populating throughout each of these different companies. And again, for someone like me, as I continue to work through these emails, I want to bring Jasper into the fold to help me continue to quality check and check my brand using Jasper's extension to help me side by side. But for all of these account-based marketing emails that we're creating, there's one more component that I want to add here to really bring these to life. And that's one final sort of Jasper workflow automation to allow for me to actually bring images into these emails to really make them stand out. So what I'm showing you here now is a Google folder that includes a series of product images for each retailer that I'm targeting. And I really want to show these retailers how I can actually add things like holiday backgrounds to help personalize them for each of these different companies that we have. But again, with another Jasper-powered workflow automation, once I've uploaded these images into this folder, Jasper's already been hard at work helping me create unique and tailored images, replacing these backgrounds for specific holidays like Christmas or New Year's that allow for me to have these personalized, seasonalized images for each of these unique retailers. So now that we've gone ahead and we've gone and created our emails, which is exciting from that brief, we've now created our images with that workflow. There's really just one last step for me, which is to bring this all together. And that's where I get to show you one final Jasper-powered workflow automation, which is actually bringing this into the places that we work, like HubSpot. And what I'm going to show you here is how Jasper can actually take this content that we've created and bring it to other CRMs or other publishing tools that allow for us to actually sort through this and give it one final gut check as we move through this process of creating these emails. You can see for each of these, we have unique images and text, and all of this comes together to ultimately allow for me to finish this personalization at scale with some really beautiful emails that bring this text and image together in the places that I work. So this is sort of the end of my demonstration here. Again, want to make sure that we have plenty of time for Q&A. But before I move on to that, I just want to kind of re-highlight everything that we just saw here as we work through this. We first started with some data within a CRM that we wanted to use to allow for us to understand where we wanted to target our future campaigns. We then used Jasper's app library to help us develop a campaign strategy, building together both information from our CRM and product info from the web through a very simple application leveraging Jasper's marketing IQ. We then took that into a spreadsheet, which is where I love to work and generate these emails, but using another automation to develop each of the text and research and even pull in images for each of those on-brand emails. And then finally pushing that back out to the places that my marketing team works and publishes their content from to create these emails like what you're seeing here in HubSpot. So with that, thank you everybody again for attending. I'm going to pass it back to Loreal for the Q&A towards the end, but really appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ari. Super helpful just to contextualize what we're talking about in terms of a workflow. And full disclosure, this is a workflow that we're actively using within Jasper's marketing team to do our own account-based marketing. But it's kind of the end-to-end process. And what I love about this story is that it really is for us the new normal. We experimented with it maybe about 6 months ago when we rolled out a campaign. It worked so well and was so effective that now it has basically literally become our new normal. Every time we do a product launch, we now have this account-based marketing component of the launch where we run through basically the process that Ari just shared with you. It's something that a lot of our customers have found valuable as well. And so it just goes to show that, AI really can help us reimagine our processes, do more with less. It's able to, again, once you reach that AI inflection point, you're able to have fewer constraints because we could do this with a lot fewer people than would have previously been required to build all of those personalized emails, but can also allow you to have a higher impact, have, more customer engagement, better pipeline impact and results. And so I think that that's the powerful thing, again, about AI being able to drive that enterprise transformation. So with that, happy to open it up to more questions. I know there's been a couple questions on whether or not we can share this recording, and absolutely, I do think that we're planning on sharing this. So we can send that out after. Any other questions here? Eli, anything else to add?
No, I don't think so. I think, look, it's an exciting time to be a marketeer. So I'm excited to see what you all go do.
Great. Cool. Well, I think we can go ahead and wrap then. Thank you so much for attending today. I hope you found this valuable. Hopefully it was some food for thought. Feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions. But thanks again for spending some time with us today. Take care.